Welcome to Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast. We encourage you to check out our website by going to hancepodcast.com. Today, Chancellor Hance welcomes Drayton McLane Jr. Mr. McLane is a chairman of the McLane Group, a holding company with a portfolio of various diverse enterprises. He was, until 1990, the CEO of the McLane Company, a grocery and food service warehouse, supply, and logistics firm, and was from 1993 until 2011 the chairman and CEO of the Houston Astros. Mr. McLane joined Chancellor Hance at his class at Texas Tech University, Seminar in Business Leadership.
I want to mention one thing. When we were having a fight with A&M for a vet school, he helped us tremendous. Right now, Proposition 5 is up for the state, and it's to give additional money to Texas Tech, University of Houston, and a couple other schools. And he is chair of it, even though he's a Baylor guy. He's been chairman of the board at Baylor, and he believes in higher education, and he has been a great supporter of Texas Tech. And when we were in the fight with A&M over another vet school, he was there for us, and we appreciate him very much. And you got some family. Do you want to introduce your family?
Sure. I have a daughter-in-law and a son, Drayton and Amy. Are they in here now?
Stand up, Drayton.
Stand up.
Stand up. Stand up.
And Amy. And then I have 3 grandsons, Drayton, who just stood up, Brooks, and Walker. Thank you all for being here.
Amy served on the Texas Tech alumni board of directors at one time. She's a Red Raider. And Drayton Fourth is president of Texas Tech students. We keep stealing your kids. I appreciate all the help you've given us over the years. We try to steal your kids. Make sure they don't go to
competition is what makes America great.
Yeah. I want to, first of all, I want you to tell me about your parents, who they were, what they did.
Okay, I was born in a small town in Central Texas, Cameron, Texas, town of 5,400. Anybody else grew up in a small town? You knew everybody in town. Everybody knew you. I had 2 older sisters. Joanne was 4 years older, and Kate was 2 years older. And my sisters and I had 2 of the finest Christian parents anyone could ever have. And growing up in a small town, there was a lot of family togetherness and do that. And our parents were a big reason that we have had good lives. They've taught us a great deal. But anybody have a mother that talked to you a lot about one subject? I had a mother, and she had one consistent thought. And I grew up in the early 50s, and there wasn't a TV room. TV wasn't invented then. And it was a family room. It was where your mother and dad's bedroom was, and there was 1 or 2 chairs in there. And I spent a lot of time as a prisoner in there, my mother talking to me. And she had one theme that she said to my 2 sisters and myself. I got it at least 5,000 times. She said, the most important thing in our life is our Christian faith and our belief in the Lord Jesus Christ. And she said, that's number 1. Said number 2, the love of your entire family. Most people narrow it down to their brothers and sisters. She talked about your entire family. She said, the love of your whole family. And the 3rd, she said, is going to totally dictate what kind of life you live. And she said, that is who you select to be your friends. And if you make wise choices, it'll lift your life and get you far beyond. Said, make bad choices and it'll destroy you. So as a kid and then a teenager growing up in Cameron, my mother had spies all over town. And I spent a lot of time in the chair beside her where she was reviewing some of my friends. And she said, you were making poor choices. I ultimately went to Baylor, which was about 60 miles away. And I thought, yippee, I'm done with this. So I was at Baylor and came back after about 6 weeks And I thought that I was far beyond that discussion. So I got home, and the very first thing she said, sit down here, and I want you to describe your new friends to me. So even though she didn't know them, so throughout my life then, she wanted me, and as a business person, and I was traveling all over the United States, and every time I was with her, I had to describe my friends. I remember in the latter part of her life, she was in Scott and White Hospital in Temple in very poor health, and I'd go by to see her, and she was in her late 80s, and she, again, would want to know who my friends were. So I would give you a challenge as you live your life. Choose them wisely. They'll lift you up.
That's good advice. Good advice. You graduated from Baylor and then went to Michigan State to get an MBA.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about that. You hadn't been out of the state of Texas much.
Well, I'd been out of the state of Texas. Back when I grew up and the chancellor grew up, you didn't go anywhere. You went about 30 or 40 miles was a big deal. You know, I grew up in Cameron, and Waco was about 60 miles away, and I thought that was like going to New York City. When I went to Waco back in the 50s, and my mother would tell my two sisters and I if we behaved well, and the following Saturday we'd go to Waco. So that was a big deal. So I hadn't been out of Texas much. But could I share one more thing? I think the greatest joy in life is an experience. Something happened to you. We talk about strategic planning. That sounds good. But things just work out sometime. And I was drifting through Baylor, and I was a junior in Baylor. And my father was in the wholesale grocery business, sold grocery stores and supermarkets in Cameron. And it was a big business for Cameron, but in the grocery industry wasn't real big. And he called me one day and said that my mother and he were going to New Orleans to a grocery meeting. Would I like to go? And I said, New Orleans? You bet. Told him over the phone. He said, well, there's a rule. When we go there, they have meetings from 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, and you got to go to the meeting. I said, great, I'll do that. And the second day of the meeting, I'm not sure I paid any attention the first day. Second day, I went to the meeting, and the first persons on there this was in 1957, before any of your parents were born. And graduate MBA programs were just developing. And the dean of the Graduate School of Business at Michigan State, it was one of the first MBA programs, was one of the top 10, and they had a program in logistics, the business my father was in. The dean got up, and I was just spellbound by him. And he brought 3 students with him that were students in this MBA program, and I just was floored by those 2. So as soon as the program was up, I turned to my dad and I said, I'd like to go there. And he said, well, why don't you go talk to the dean? So I went up and talked to the dean. Guess what the first question he asked me? What's your GPA? You still talk about grade point average here?
They'll do it.
And I said, well, maybe a B+. He said, that won't get you in Michigan State. So he said, have them send your grades, and we did, and I finally got admitted, and that totally, completely changed my life.
One experience.
One experience. If my father had not invited me to go to that meeting, and I go, and that dean and those 3 students, I would have had a different course in my life.
They opened your eyes to new things.
I was just spellbounded by those 3 students, what they knew versus what I knew.
What were you majoring in at Baylor at the time?
I was majoring in business. I was taking accounting and economics and marketing and a business course.
And getting a good education.
Yeah, I was doing pretty good.
But what that MBA was going to be was something totally different.
Put me in a different environment. In the MBA program, there were 72 students in a 2-year program, and the average age was 29 to 30. Most of them had been in business. And the students were smart, and the professors were even smarter. It just totally changed everything. I was in the minor leagues.
But you were hitting like you were in the major leagues.
Well, you had to learn.
Graduated.
You had to learn. You have to adapt. And I can encourage you, challenge yourself. Get ahead of yourself sometime. Can I tell a interesting story? It's kind of embarrassing.
You can tell any story.
I I got out of Baylor a semester early in December my senior year, and Michigan State in graduate school, they started in September. So I started the second semester. The 72 had already started. They had one semester. Now I went in the January spring semester at Michigan State, and the other in the course were already there. They were much older. They were much experienced. My experience in the grocery business was driving a truck for my dad in the summertime and just working in the business. I didn't know any strategy, developments, or anything. So I got in this course, and these guys were way over my head. And they had already had a semester, and I was one of the first courses was a where you case studies. I'm sure y'all have done those here, and they were really advanced into these. And the first 2 weeks in a case study course, I'm not sure I said anything. And before one day I went to class, and the professor said, "When the class is over with, would you stop by and talk to me?" I thought, boy, he's going to brag on me. I'm brand new here, and he's going to really encourage me. I went up to see him afterward, and he said, "I'm putting you on notice. You have done nothing to contribute to this class. You're not engaged in this class. You're making no contribution whatsoever. And I'm going to give you 2 weeks to improve, or I'm going to ask the dean to take you out of the MBA program." And he turned around and walked off.
Wow.
I thought, where was the gentleness from Baylor? But, you never want to lose. So you got to learn to adopt. So we don't challenge ourselves a lot. I learned a great deal of that, and then that helped me in business later. Be around people that are really, really smart. They have big ideas. They challenge you intellectually. They challenge you daringly. And that was a learning experience there.
A great experience, and that.
And I didn't get kicked out.
But what did you do to make sure that you didn't?
I just started talking, and I didn't have a clue what I was talking about sometimes. But you pick up from others, figure out the people that have got the trend, the ideas, and hang out with them. And I'd go talk to them after class or go see them, and I'd get ideas, and I got corrected a lot. But you got to make a contribution.
Our mutual friend, Ed Whitaker, talks about that when he went to work for the phone company, he would seek out the people he thought were the smartest and try to learn everything he could from them.
And that was what my mother was saying.
Yeah.
Get with great people that want to be somebody, that have high integrity, and stick with it.
So you got your MBA, and did you go back and take over the business, or did you go back and work? What did you do?
Well, I got out. I was 23, and I came back to visit my mother and dad. I could have a job in San Francisco working for Kraft, and that sure sounded appealing, better than living in Cameron. So I came back through Cameron to see my mother and dad, and my father never had challenged me to come into the business. I admire him for that. Too many people get pushed into family businesses they really didn't want to do. And he never did. And he just asked me what I planned to do. And I told him that I was going to San Francisco. I was single. That sure sounded exciting. And but I said, in a few years, I'd like to come back and be in business with you. And he said, "Son, I have not modernized this business like I should have in the last few years, and it needs a total reinvestment." And at my age, he was 60, he was 58. It doesn't pay to make that kind of investment, but if you're interested, we would want you to. So he said, if you want to come back to this business, you got to do it now, or there won't be one to come back to in 5 or 8 years. And I thought, wow, Cameron was 5,000. I was single in San Francisco. I didn't sleep very good that night. And early in the morning when I hopped up, I couldn't wait to go see my dad. And I said, I'm ready to roll. So he seemed excited. And I said, Dad, what's going to be my job? He had 67 employees. I was going to be the 68th. I knew I was going to be his assistant. And he said, you're going to be working on the third shift at night loading trucks. I said, Dad, I've been to college for 6 years. Isn't there a better job? He said, you're not qualified for anything else there. Well, that kind of hit me hard, and that kind of ticked me off. So I went to my mother. I appealed to my mother, and she said, well, that's between you and your dad. And so I saw that if I was going to stay there, I had to do that. That was the best thing my father could have done for me, because there were 9 others on that third shift at night. I got to know them. I got to understand working class people, blue collar people, understood what motivated them, how to talk to them, how to encourage them. But then I learned how the business worked. So that was the best thing he ever did for me.
Did he move you around in different sections
No,
of the
sir.
business, or that,
18
just that
months,
one time?
I was on the third shift. 18 months, and then he put me on the second shift. We got a big promotion, and I was only there for about 6 months. So when you get a job, too often we get started up here when we ought to start here. And with your education and experience, you can zoom like a rocket with your education. So start, and you'll figure out the business because you're with the people. Later, as McLane Company got complicated and somebody was telling me about a problem, I already had it figured out how I was going to solve it because I'd done it all. And so I encourage you, whatever business, whether you're a butcher, baker, or candlestick maker, whatever you want to do, start at the bottom. And with your education and experience and desire, you'll zoom.
I've had a lot of friends that went in the executive training program, and they put them at lower levels in different sections for the reason that you'll learn at that level, so that when you're at a higher level, somebody comes in and complains about something, you will know what they're talking about.
And you'll learn to work with that class of person.
That's right. That's right. And how long did y'all were still in Cameron? When did you move? Were you in charge?
I joined my dad in the summer of 1959, and my father and mother allowed me to build a new distribution center in Temple. Temple's 35 miles west of Temple. At that time, it was a town of about 67,000, so we moved there in 1966. So that was 7 years. But we built a brand new, very modern distribution center.
And did you shut down the Cameron operation?
Yes, sir.
You get a lot of pushback in Cameron?
My father was the largest employer in town and the second largest in the county. And he took a lot of grief, but that people, and a lady there, I'll never forget it, she was head of the Chamber of Commerce, and she kind of got upset with me. And she saw my dad one day and said, Mr. McLane, the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life was sending him to college.
And you were making those decisions she didn't like.
We moved the business.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
So you use the skills that you learn along the way.
In the distributions, what did y'all distribute food to?
We distributed
cafes,
foods
restaurants?
Mainly to small rural supermarkets, and then some larger supermarkets, and then ultimately, and we started in 1968, supplying to convenience stores. And convenience stores were kind of revolutionary. They were just emerging and were being built all over the United States. And we expanded into that distribution center all over the United States ultimately.
You had that. We had lunch with the chairman of the board at Texas Tech, Mark Griffin, and you got his dad's business.
Well, they were in the truck fueling business, and they had the big convenience stores there. And he was here in Lubbock, and I came out here and started talking to him. And I guess he thought I was in Abilene or Amarillo or Lubbock, and he said, "Where's your operation?" I told him Temple, Texas, and he first said, "Where in the heck is that?" But he was a great businessman, a very motivated human being.
Yeah, I know he was.
And that's the joy you'll get in business ultimately, or relationships. People ask me all the time, said, "What's the most enjoyable thing of your career?" I've been in business almost 60 years. And I said, the most enjoyable and the most meaningful thing are the relationships you develop, the relationships with your employees, relationships with your customers, relationship with vendors you do, and relationships and putting deals together and making something really complicated work very well.
Well, you know, they considered you, they had truck stops and convenience stores. But they talk. His son talks about Drayton McLane was our partner, and so y'all helped them at the time. You evidently helped them with their financing on certain things, and so that people weren't doing that at the time. Was that your idea, or?
Well, one of the things we did is that people are fun, and you kind of study the people you're around, and you're experiencing things. This was in the late 60s and 70s. Again, people weren't expanding, and we were doing business all over, at that time, Texas and New Mexico and Colorado and Oklahoma. And I would go see him here in Lubbock, and I'd tell him something I saw in Oklahoma City. And I'd be in Oklahoma City, and I'd tell him about something I saw in Lubbock. People like to be around people that make them feel good about themselves, and you've said something good to them. And I would give ideas and motivate people. And so I would, as you go around, you see something good everywhere you go. No one group has cornered all the good ideas. So I would try to get good ideas and move them along.
This is important. He was out there trying to expand his business, and he was sharing with these convenience stores, truck stop, and what he was finding out in other places. And that's the reason they felt like he was a partner. He was helping on financing. And so when they had a new operation come up, first call they made.
Sure, they wanted something new.
Yeah.
New ideas. And I'd come see the customers about once a month, like Rip Griffin out here, and he'd say, well, what's new since you were here last time? I told him McLane Company was kind of like Christopher Columbus. We were out seeing something new and sharing the ideas. So you live in a modern era where you're holding your iPhone and you have that, but people still want to be around people who have ideas, they have knowledge, and they trust.
That's the reason I talked to you about is social media is fine, everything, but knowing people in a relationship is so important that they know you're just not somebody on social media. One thing I want to do, I want to stop. Mayor Dan Pope, former mayor of Lubbock, is here, from Temple. Raise your hand and stand up. Stand up.
When I was young and single, he was a junior and senior in Temple High, and I was his Sunday school teacher, and I tried to get him under control. I'm not sure how good a job I did in those days, but the mayor is a great human being, and he has ventured. He's been in several different businesses and just started a brand new business, a brand new bank. So congratulations on being an entrepreneur.
And you invested with him.
Sure did. I trust him.
You taught him Sunday school.
Well, no, I know his mother and dad. And I know his mother real well. And I can get anything out from him. I can just call his mother.
Then you get it done.
Relationships are the deal in life.
Yeah. Well, Mayor Pope was the best mayor we've ever had at recruiting businesses to come to Lubbock, Texas, by far. Nobody else is even close second. Getting back to the company, you merged, or they bought you Walmart. What year was that?
It started in September of 1990, and we concluded it in January of 91.
And how did it start? Did Sam Walton, who started Walmart, did he call you, or did one of his assistants, or?
Somebody like Walmart doesn't call you. You got to go after. In life, you got to attack it. In business, you got to attack it. You got to go out and do things. We were supplying, and then this was in the late 70s. I heard that Walmart was building some that weren't called super centers, they were called discount stores in those days. And they were in Arkansas and Missouri and Oklahoma. And I heard there, we delivered there, and I heard of them, and I heard of Sam Walton. So do they still teach business letter writing? That used to be a course in the business school at Baylor. Learn how to really write a great letter. That's something to do. But anyway, I took a course in business letter writing. Anyway, I called Sam Walton several times on the phone, never returned my call. So I decided I would write him a letter. And I got my business letter writing book down, and I wrote him a really neat letter and sent it to him. Never heard a word. Wrote him 2 other letters. Never heard a word. So I met a salesman who was in the meat business that lived in Springdale, Arkansas. And I asked him if he knew Sam Walton. He said, not real well, but I do know him. I asked him if he could get me an appointment, and he did. And went up to see.
But he had refused to take 3 or 4 calls, and it turns down 3 letters.
But I got there because
he didn't give up.
This guy's name was Bob Wynn, lived in Springdale, and Bob got me the appointment. Bob went with me. And he said, McLane, what do you do? And I told him, we have grocery distribution centers, trucks, big computers. We can do this. And he said, I don't need a darn thing you do. I got more warehouses than you have. I've got more trucks than you do, and I got a bigger computer. I don't need anything you have. So you can easily get discouraged. I thought, I'm not going to let that beat me. So I went to see him. His office was open then. You could walk in. I went up there the first of every month. I went there for 9 straight months. And one time he said, quit coming up here. You're wasting our time. And my theme to he and David Gleis, who was the president of Walmart, that when they had a problem in logistics, let me know. I'd fix it for them. I didn't have any idea what I was talking about. But I kept saying that. And one day, the phone rang, and I picked it up, and it said, McLane? I said, yes, sir. He said, this is Sam Walton. You still want to fix a problem in logistics? And I said, absolutely. And he said, we'll be here tomorrow, and we'll work something out. So just stay persistent. Don't let people crush your dreams. And don't take rejections as bad. Just keep pursuing it. So anyway, you got to know them, and we started in some minor programs with them, and it ultimately developed. We were their number 1 grocery logistics company.
You were the number 1 grocery distribution company?
For Walmart. That was back.
That's huge.
Can I tell you, though, you got to have big ideas, but you fail. If something's working for you, that's maybe the worst thing that can happen, because you then think that's the only way to do it. And as times change, you're still doing the same way. And so this was, and I can still remember in September of 1990, Sam Walton, he and I became really good friends, and I traveled with him a lot as he was touring stores. And he called me one day and he said, could David Gleis and I come to the Temple to see you tomorrow? Well, that's unusual for the customer to come to see us. I said, absolutely. So we toured the distribution center, and he said, let's go in the office. And he said, Drayton, I want you to sit in that chair and not say a word till I finish. And I thought, wow. I thought, man, we're going to get a lot of business from them. And he said, David Gleis and I have a big idea. This was before the big super centers. This was where their stores then were about 130,000 square feet, had very little grocery products in them. He said, David and I have come up with a big idea, and we want you to be part of it. I thought, wow. He said, we're going to build a new store, and we're going to call it Super Centers. This was 1990. And they're going to be 200,000 square feet, and we're going to put a 55,000 square foot grocery supermarket right in the middle of it, and we're going to call it a super center, and we're going to open it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, I jumped up and I said, Sam, people don't want to buy groceries at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he said, I didn't come down here to ask you your opinion. I came down here to give you a big idea. And said, the supermarket is going to be the cornerstone of this, and we're going to build them all over the United States. And in 10 years, we'll be Safeway was the largest supermarket operator. Kroger was number 2. Others were down the line. And he said, in 10 years, we'll be the biggest. And I said, Sam, you won't do it in 20 years. They did it in 3. So he said, we're going to open these big stores. We don't understand food, logistics, and perishables like meat and produce, and you all know how to do that. And he said, our business was owned by our family, my father, myself, and my 2 sisters, and said, we want to buy a McLane Company. Well, I jumped up again, and I said, McLane Company is not for sale. He said, let me tell you this. He said, I want you to buy McLane Company, continue to be the CEO of McLane Company, and become the vice chairman of Walmart. You'll be the number 3 guy at Walmart. You know what I said? I don't want to be the number 3 guy at Walmart. I like what I'm doing. So I kind of turned him down. I got home that night. My wife's name is Elizabeth, and she said when I got home, "What's this big deal about Sam?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, Sam called me and told me that I had a big idea for your son or your husband, and he wouldn't pay any attention to me." I was too absorbed with what we were doing, and kind of had to go see him 2 or 3 times. It went on for 2 or 3 weeks, and they were really pushing me hard to do it, and I didn't see it. When my father was 92 years old, was not active in the business, but came down 2 or 3 days a week and knew things. And I thought one day, I hadn't told my dad about this big idea Sam Walton had. And so I went in and I told him, I said, "I don't think it's any good, but this is what he wants us to do." And my father looked at me and he said, "I think you ought to do it." So, man, he's 92 years old. And he said, at that time we were doing about 11 billion. And he said, "This is awfully big for a privately owned business. You might want to think about being part of that." And I was just shocked that a 92-year-old businessman saw something I didn't see. We get very sold on what we're doing. We get very, very sold on ourselves and our ideas and what we're doing. And I was just shocked. He said,
But y'all were doing 11 billion
Mhm.
at that time.
But they were doing 175 billion.
Right.
So I went to see him in David's glass ball office with Sam and David, and I'm talking to a lawyer here. The three of us did the deal of merging McLane Company with Walmart and didn't have any lawyer around.
That's the reason you got it done so well.
Absolutely. And so success spoils us, and we get sold on that. If I could regress one more piece of advice, and I think of this every morning when I get up, and can I challenge you? I went to a grocery industry convention in 1972. The president of Kroger was there, and the first thing he said is, "You'll never become what you want to be by remaining as you are." Can I say that again? You'll never, ever become what you want to be. Lofty goals by staying the way you are. You all broke the rules when you came to college. Been awful easy to stay home or take a job somewhere, but you did it. I think of that every morning when I get up. You'll never become what you want to be by remaining as you are. So you got to learn from your experience. And the mayor over here is now in the banking business and never been in the banking business in his life, and they're off to a roaring start. And I bet he's having a lot of fun. So move forward in life. Keep challenging yourself.
But y'all were doing 11 billion at the time. It was in the press what they paid for you, and what they pay, and I recall.
Well, we got stock in Walmart, which was very marketable stock.
Okay, you got a good stock.
Yeah,
and you became vice chairman of the board of Walmart. That's big time.
Back in 1991.
Big time.
So it gave bigger ideas. Life is wonderful. And no matter wherever you start there and you expand and keep thinking, and don't ever get satisfied. Be a little disenchanted all the time. Sam Walton asked me one time, he and I were just touring stores, and he asked me, he said, "Do you sleep well?" I said, "Not well at all." He said, "Great." I said, "What?" He said, "I've never met a highly successful person who sleeps well." College student, I slept good when I was in college, but when they get in business, they'll find out something.
Well, I
else.
tell y'all about my sleeping habits.
What are yours?
I go to sleep. I get ready for bed at 12. At 12:30, I'm in bed, and I get up at 4:30.
I get up at 4:30. I was up at 4:15 this morning. But I remember he said that to me. He said, "I've never met a really motivated person that slept well. He just stirred up all the time."
Yeah, it's like going on.
But teenagers can sleep well.
Elon Musk says it's hard for him to sleep because his brain won't shut down.
I think that's the problem. Well, you think of what the next day brings,
Yeah.
or other problems that are further down the road, and you wake up and you're wrestling with those. I'm not sure that's a perfect way to live your life, but you sure have a lot of objects simultaneously.
Okay, got stock, and did you stay in position as CEO of McLane?
Yes.
And
Continued to run McLane Company, and then I spent part of the time in Bentonville, Arkansas.
Well, Sam Walton, just briefly, what kind of guy?
He was a restless human being. Sam, if you want to, it's a bigger town now. It's about 60,000. When I first go in there, Bentonville was a little over 4,000, and he was in this small town. And Sam loved to tell this story. He had 7 Ben Franklin stores. Anybody ever heard of Ben Franklin store? They're small variety stores, and they were franchised, and he had 7 of them. And in 1961, he had heard that a new company, a new retailer was formed right outside of Detroit, Michigan, and the company was Kresge Company. They had variety stores, thousands of them all over the Midwest, and they had opened a store right outside of Detroit, and they called it Kmart. And Sam went up to see this first Kmart, said he came home, told Helen, his wife, we're selling all 7 Ben Franklin stores. We're going to sell them all. And we're going to open a discount store. And I heard Helen say this many times. I said, Sam, what is a discount store? But he did. You'll never become what you want to be by remaining. He sold them all, started the first one in Rogers, Arkansas in 1962. And if you think you can't do something in life, Sam was a graduate of the University of Missouri, but was just a great retailer and a big-time thinker. And think of this today. Walmart this last year did $587 billion. It's the largest corporation in the history of the world. It's twice the size of any other big corporation. Exxon's one of them, or Amazon's another, but they're twice the size. And they're based in Bentonville, Arkansas. They got 1.8 million employees. Biggest employers were bigger than the U.S. military. And they doing business in 29 countries all over the world. And they're the largest corporation in the history of the world. In a small town in Bentonville. Wasn't started until 1962 and was started by a guy that had 7 Ben Franklin stores. Life is rich and new ideas are everywhere.
You got into the baseball business. Tell us about that.
Well, I said we get into I said life is rich and exciting and gives you more opportunities. Just pay attention. One day I was in my office in McLane Company. We grew McLane Company over 32% per year for 32 consecutive years. We were really cooking. And I got a phone call from 2 individuals in Houston. One of them was Ben Love. You probably knew Ben Love.
Good friend.
Ben Love was the CEO of the largest bank in Texas, Texas Commerce, and Bob Armstead had a big supermarket called Randall's. We were borrowing a lot of money from Texas Commerce, and we were Randall's. And they called and said, we got a big idea for you. I thought, what? Said 5 others of us are negotiating to buy the Houston Astros. They were owned by an individual in New York City, and he was ready to sell, and we're forming a group, and we would like for you to be the 6th member. You know what I said? I said, I have no interest whatsoever in being involved in a baseball team, having too much money, too much fun in the grocery business, and I thanked them. Sometimes you can get ahead of good common sense. When I hung up, I realized one of them was my lead banker, and the other was one of my big customers. So I called him back and said, I apologize. I'll come down. And so the 5 of us negotiated to buy the Houston Astros, and the owner was a very, very difficult person in New York. And we negotiated for about 6 months, and none of the 6 of us were really accustomed to working with other people, and we kind of stumbled all over each other. And finally, one day I got a call from Ben Love, the biker, and said, we've just decided that John McMullen is too difficult to deal with. He wants too much for the Astros, and we're going to abandon this. And I got to thinking, I never backed away. I found it fascinating, something different, never been in professional sports. And the discussions were fascinating. So I called him back and I said, do you mind if I try to do it on my own? And he said, if you're that big a fool, go ahead. So it's, again, it wasn't a strategic plan on my part. Events occurred. Got to have enough good judgment to move forward. And that's how we got involved in buying the Houston Astros.
You got the deal done with him.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the first thing you did once you got them purchased? Did you go meet the general manager and the team?
Yeah. You know,
how was that?
That was different. And, I was custom. McLane Company at that time, we had about 16,000 employees. And buying the Houston Astros was no big deal. We had 25 players on the major league team. It's about 7 managers, and then all the administrative side was about 120. And then you had the minor league players, but it wasn't half a third as complicated as running McLane Company, but it was interesting and fascinating. But I didn't have much knowledge. But again, my mother said, find out who the good people are, people with high integrity, good values. So I found a bunch of baseball people who told me what to do.
And you listened.
Tried to listen. Not always are we good listeners. We got personal opinions and axe to grind and to move forward. And you got to move forward. Can I tell you my first baseball experience?
Absolutely.
Anybody ever been to spring training down in Florida or Arizona? I'd never been. And my son, Drayton, Denton, and my wife, we went to spring training. And I thought, well, this is going to be really neat. So Art Howe was our manager, and they had all the major league team, 25 players over here, and I didn't know them. And I said, Art, everything I've tried to do in life and business is to teamwork and working together and all having the same goals. One afternoon after practice here in spring training, could we bring the 25 players together? And he said, what? I told him I'd like to talk to him. He said, I've never seen that in Major League Baseball. And I said, well, I want to get to know the players, and we all have a common goal. He said, okay. So the next day, I went in our conference room, and he had the 25 players and the coaches, and I told him who in the heck I was and that I wanted to work together with teamwork. We work together. We all have the same common goals, and we really, really work hard as teammates. Well, again, there was just 25 players. I looked out. You ever talk to a group and you saw that they weren't listening to anything you said? Does that ever happen to me?
It's happened to me before.
I looked out there, and I remember one guy, his name was Mark Portugal. He was a wild pitcher. He had a stocking cap pulled over his head. You couldn't even see his head. And others were in disbelief, and they were really bored to tears. So after talking to him for about 10 minutes, we ended it, and I told Art, I said, that didn't work, did it? He said, it absolutely didn't work. And he said, I'm not sure what you were trying to do, but he said, they didn't comprehend anything you talked about in this teamwork and working together. And he said, why don't we do this again right after we start the season in the old Astrodome? So after we played a couple of games, the next day I brought them back together. I gave them the best fiery, emotional speech and same lousy results. So after it's over with, Art, the manager, said, I think he felt sorry for me. And he said, why don't you come in my office and let's talk? I said, great. So I went in there, and he said, they have no idea what you're talking about, and they don't care. He said, you kept talking to them about teamwork and working together. And he said, I hate to tell you this, but baseball is not teamwork. I was shocked. Remember high school sports? They talk about teamwork and working together. He said, baseball's not teamwork. And I said, well, what is it that baseball is? He said, they're trying to work to get what they want done. And he said, if you're the third baseman and that ball's hit to you, it's going to come at you in excess of 200 miles an hour. It's only going 90 feet. And he said, it's all about that third baseman's skill. Doesn't have anything to do with anybody else. He said it's all in the skills of that third baseman. And in baseball, if he doesn't handle that hit, he gets a big arrow on the scoreboard and everybody boos. Said, this is not hockey. This is not basketball. It's not football where they're all together. And he said that the statement that really has meant a lot to me, he said, baseball is an individual sport that teams play. You're that third base. You're on your own. He said, pitching and hitting, the pitcher's out there and he's looking at the hitter. And the hitter's trying to figure out what he's going to pitch, and the pitcher's trying to think what's going to get him an out. He says, between those two. He said, the outfielders are out there and they got their hands on the knees and saying, don't hit it to me. Said, it's an individual sport that teams play. And he said, you pay each one of these 25 players not on how well the team did. You pay them on their individual statistics. That's how you pay them. One guy you might be paying $2 million to, and another one you might be paying $30 million to. Said they don't get paid about winning. They get paid by their statistics. And that's how they're paid, and that's how they're judged. So that's why they don't understand what you're talking about, all this teamwork. He said, it's an individual sport that teams play. That helped me change my whole attitude to the players. They cared about their batting average, their pitching percentage, their fielding percentage. That's what they get paid for. They don't get paid by the team winning. When you're in business, you get paid by the team being successful. So you need to be around whatever business you get into. You need to understand the basic rules of them. And then I developed a great relationship with the players. They cared about themselves. It's the only business we've ever seen where each individual player has an agent. And you got to work through the agent. So it was an interesting process. And the other thing I learned about a professional sport franchise, you think you own the team, you really don't. The public owns the team. They're the ones that come, 40,000 people to the game, and thousands are watching it over TV. And they have great, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, whatever it is, professionally, they have wise thoughts to the owner that he might not doing all that he should be doing. So you got to, and more so than in business, you're subject to constant criticism. So you got to learn to deal with that too.
And you everything you've touched have had problems, and they've had solutions.
That's why they're going to school.
That's right.
You get ready weren't for problems, there would be no opportunity for you. There are problems with everything. And you got to figure those out and figure out a better solution. Are any of you old enough to remember the flip phone? Are they old enough to know that?
Yeah.
Flip phone was the first. The other remote phones were about this big.
Yep.
And they came out with a flip phone. It was about this tall.
Flip top.
And like it, you could flip it up and put it in your pocket like it. And I saw it. And it was developed by Motorola. When that came out, you could put it in your pocket and you could call from everywhere. And Mayor, do you remember the flip phone? Didn't you think that was? I thought it'll never get better than this. It lasted 3 years. Then the iPhone came out. Flip phone, you could only make a call. That's all you could do with it.
Well, Ed Whitaker and Steve Jobs made the deal on the iPhone.
Absolutely. They marketed for it. But the iPhone can do everything in the world. And the flip phone ceased to be important, and Motorola went bankrupt. You got to keep moving in life.
Drayton, thank you so much. I'll tell you this, and knowing him over the years, somebody asked me about Drayton McLane, and I said, let me tell you, the dictionary, when you look up gentleman, should not have a definition on the head of his picture. He is a true gentleman. He's a hard negotiator, but he's learned a lot. And Sam Walton didn't want to see you. He didn't want to see you. He turned your calls down, turned your letters down, and you finally You didn't give up. You finally got in the
Be
seat.
persistent in life.
Yeah, be persistent.
Be persistent, make straight A's one semester. Is that a good challenge?
That's a great challenge. Drayton, thank you so much for sharing
Thank
this.
you.
And we appreciate you very much. We appreciate all you've done for Texas Tech and Baylor and higher education.
Do they all feel guilty of how bad Tech beat Baylor Saturday?
They do today because of you. We
A lot
feel a
of
little guilty.
A lot of sorrow here.
But we don't want to change it.
I see.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.